This screencast is going to focus on the concept of unit rates. So the first thing we're going to do is define what unit rates are, and then we're going to take a look at how you would write a unit rate, because it is a little bit different than a ratio. So let's go ahead and describe what a unit rate is. So a unit rate is a comparison of two items or two quantities, and one of the numbers being compared is the number 1, so it's equal to the number 1. So let's go ahead and get down a written definition for a unit rate. So like I said before, a unit rate is a comparison of two different quantities or numbers in which one of the numbers being compared is 1 unit. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that would look like. So if we look over here at the second part, it says, how do I write unit rates? Well, like we said before, one of the numbers is always going to be the number 1. That's why it's called a unit rate. So this is super important that we remember the 1 unit part. So let's say we're talking about that it costs $10 to get into an amusement park, and that gets one person into the amusement park. So one way that we could write the unit rate would be $10 per person. You notice this is a little bit different than what we use to write ratios, so we're using this new word per. We can also write the same unit rate as $10 for every person. So here's another new phrase, for every person. And then finally, another way that we could write this would be $10 for each person. So $10 for each person, where the new phrase would be for each. So we can use the phrase per, for every, or for each to write a unit rate. Let's go ahead and take a look at an example. So this example says that it costs $120 for 10 students to go on a field trip. What is the cost per student? Remember how we talked about ratios? Ratios have to be written in a specific order. Same thing with a unit rate. If it says cost per student, that means the money has to be on the left and the student has to be on the right. So it might help to write it out just like I did. So let's go ahead and write out our original ratio. So we have $120 for 10 students. But our goal is to get this cost per student. This is cost for one student. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the idea of equivalent ratios in order to find our unit rate. So that means that we are trying to change 10 students into 1 student because we're trying to find the cost per student. Well, how would we go from 10 to 1? Remember, when we're finding equivalent ratios, we're using either multiplication or division. Because we're going from a bigger number to a smaller number, we are going to use division. So we're going to divide by 10. This is similar to equivalent fractions, equivalent ratios. Remember, whatever we do to one side of the ratio, we have to do to the other side of the ratio. So if we're dividing by 10 on the right-hand side, we need to divide by 10 on the left-hand side. And now we're going to figure out that 120 divided by 10 is going to be equal to $12. So in this case, it would be $12 per student. We could also say $12 for every student or $12 for each student. I just chose the word per because it makes a little bit more sense here. So $12 per student would be our answer. Let's take a look at another example. Our second example says the cost of food is $250 for 50 students. What is the cost per student? Once again, looking at the fact that cost is coming first and then student is coming second. Once again, we're looking at 1 student. So if we write out our original ratio, we have $250 for 50 students. But our goal is to go from 50 students to 1 student because we're trying to find the cost per student. So once again, we're going to use the idea that we're going from a bigger number to a smaller number, so we're going to divide. In order to go from 50 to 1, we're going to divide by 50. And we are going to do that on both sides. So when we do 250 divided by 50, we get $5. So the cost of food is going to be $5 per student, $5 for every student, or $5 for each student. Let's go ahead and have you guys try an example. So it says your mom bought 3 bags of chips for $3.30. How much did each bag cost? So each bag, see this phrase, each bag. So this is our one, so we're looking at cost, and then we're looking at bags. Our goal is to get or figure out how much it costs for one bag. So go ahead and try and solve this. Try and figure out the cost per bag. Once you think you have an answer, hit the play button and check your answer with mine. You'll see that I set up my original ratio, $3.30 for 3 bags. My goal is to get down to 1 bag. So I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. When I divide by 3 on both sides, I get $1.10. So when I write out my final answer, it's going to cost $1.10 for each bag, $1.10 for every bag, or $1.10 per bag. So this would be my final answer. And one more example for you guys to try. It says you have 27 lollipops to share with 9 people. How many lollipops would each person receive? This each person is your 1. So you're trying to figure out how many lollipops would each person or would one person receive. So go ahead, set up your ratio, and try and solve this. Then hit play again and see if you got the right answer. You'll see my final answer is 3 lollipops for every person, or 3 lollipops for each person, or 3 lollipops per person. So just to review, a unit rate is a comparison of 2 different items where one of the numbers being compared is 1 unit. Some examples would be $2 for 1 bag, $10 per student, 3 brownies for every person, or 3 brownies for each person. So unit rates are very similar to ratios except for the fact that when you're comparing something, one of those numbers is going to be the number 1.